It started when Satoshi made a game called Pokemon. From catching, grinding, trading battles, this game could do no wrong. So what comes next for this franchise's endless marathon in Gen 10? Gen 10! Trainers! While it's great to speculate on Legends ZA plans and whether Gen 5 remakes will happen, or if we'll be getting Let's Go Johto, I'd like to look a little further into the future for the big 3-0. Yes, the inevitable Gen 10 is guaranteed to be mentioned to celebrate a monumental milestone of 30 years of the franchise. So let's use this speculatory time to go over 10 features. 10 features that I want to see in Generation 10, and just general hopes for the next instalment that could happen. So with the first few generations, Japan was proud to use its country to shape the first 4 regions, and I don't blame them. With a rich culinary history, geographical marvels, and a vibrant culture, there was a lot to draw from for inspiration for a fictional 10-year-old playground. However, I feel they stopped this trend at the best time with the soft reset of Gen 5. Japan had run its course, so to keep things fresh and exciting for the next generation of players, they took a step in the direction of the land of the free, and honestly, as a whole they didn't do too bad of a job. From there, we've been to France, Hawaii, the UK and Spain, which are all unique in their own way, and much appreciated deviations from Japan's groundwork in the early generations. However, now Pokemon is celebrating their 30th anniversary next year, I hope when they announce Gen 10, we can go back to where it all started. There's still unexplored areas of Japan left to build a region from, and getting nostalgia from experiencing a generation that feels completely new, yet harkens back to the franchise's roots, would be insane. The region could explore more real-world locations, and have a community of NPCs that reflects a more modernised culture. The towns and cities could home updated architecture that still feels reminiscent of the simplicity of the early generations, maybe even have references to the first 4 generations sprinkled around the region for original fans to sincerely appreciate. Now we've got an idea for the region, let's discuss the Pokemon that will inhabit it. Starting off, I really hope we can get a chunkier lineup. Not in terms of weight, but how many new pocket monsters are actually introduced. Generation 1 and 5 home the most newly introduced Pokemon at just above 150. Gens 2, 3 and 4 achieve a similar feat with at least 100 new phases, and these introductions are kind of a selling point for me when a new generation comes out. However, when the later gens rolled out, it was severely lackluster to see a smaller roster for me to play with. Not to mention the limitations for first story team builds, when I only like to use newly introduced Pokemon for that region. Factor in not using things like version exclusives, post-game mons, and just terrible options that'll make you cringe in your Nuzlocke. Therefore, I hope with Generation 10, we can see a new Pokédex with at least 100 new Pokemon. I'm not talking about regional variants, convergent forms, or a subcategory rated to overpowered Pokemon with legendary worthy strengths. I'm just hoping for a solid lineup for us to look back on fondly, provided both quality and quantity are implemented. Bit of a hot take, I know, but honestly, I miss the third installment games. The red versus blue option are perfectly fine marketing strategies for people to choose from in order for them to share similar experiences with their friends and families, but I always look forward to when the third, almost remastered copy comes out. Yellow, Crystal, Emerald and Platinum are arguably the definitive experiences of the generations you want to revisit, and when games like Grey, Z, Stars and Gun aren't meant to be, it's really heartbreaking to know that until a remake comes out, the generation I get to experience will never be enhanced or improved. That's not to say the standalone games are bad by any means, but getting to experience a familiar setting with overall improvements, added features, and some new Pokemon teams to rematch story trainers is where I'd personally want my money to go over DLC content any day. However, playing devil's advocate, I do see the appeal to DLC content. Paying half the price for extensions to an already fine game is a more streamlined approach in the long run. Let's just not forget what we lost in the process. From the beginning, there were 15 types. Granted, some weren't represented well, but they were still there. Gen 2 introduced Steel and Dark, mainly for balancing issues, but honestly, they were still welcome types that draw inspiration from feasible elements. Gen 6 was the last time Pokemon introduced a new type in Fairy, for balancing once more, and since then, I feel things have been fairly balanced. So why don't we get a new generation that introduces a new type or two, just for the sake of adding a new type or two? It can still remain a balanced type chart, while also shining light on some forgotten Pokemon from the past that could do with a dual typing, or just a type overhaul. A new type would add new moves, and possibly even new status conditions, and interactions with certain in-game battle features. It could excite fans who have desperately wanted their own type ideals to become a reality, which would heighten their experiences going forward. If I had to choose, Sand type sounds like the best practical option for a new type, but then I wouldn't know what else logically would work. However, I wouldn't want there to be 19 types. I'd like a nice round 20 which could also help with balancing. Introducing a new type or two could even see a shift in the usability of certain types. Maybe Poison and Bug get buffs that could make them more important on our team, or maybe Ghost could lose some value to finally have counters to some really annoying opponents. Halfway through now, and let's go over this generation's gimmick that'll stand strong for the next few years. If we're going off the pattern of memory storage names for the next gimmick, it'll have to have the suffix Peter at the start. As a placeholder name, let's call it Peter Power. Creative, I know. Previous gimmicks have focused on moves, secondary effects, type changes, and of course, fan service. Peter Powers function in a similar way, once per battle, and probably have its own form change and animation. However, a Peter Power will focus on move effectiveness with 3 key modes. Mode 1 is Peter Power Attack. This gives a Pokemon a buff to their offense. They deal like 50% increased damage from moves, and resisted hits become neutral. Mode 2 is Peter Power Defense. This buffs a Pokemon's defense by resisting attack damage by 50%, and super effective hits become neutral. Mode 3 is Peter Power Speed, which as you've guessed will focus on the speed of a Pokemon. The Pokemon's speed will increase by 100%, and will gain +1 increased accuracy and evasion. I was going to make it so each move becomes a priority move, and the Pokemon is immune to priority attacks, but I don't see this being very fair. The premise during battle will be to decide on what mode works for what Pokemon. For example, you may have a sweeper on your team, maybe it just needs to do a little extra power. Maybe you have a wall on your team that just wants to sponge even more hits, or maybe you just need to outspeed an opponent and hit them with a move that is stronger but usually unreliable. It'll be interesting to see what Pokemon works best with which mode, and if there are some that can function by using any of the 3. This gimmick leads me on to my next hope for Generation 10. I want the evil team or organisation to be a whole unit, but they each have an admin focusing on a specific mode and have their own grunts that focus on each mode too. They should capture a legendary Pokemon based on this gimmick that they've studied to perfect Peter Powers. When you battle them, they use Peter Powers against you, and they aim to enhance what a Pokemon battle truly should be about, but in a sinister, almost unnatural kind of way. I'd like it if they were more ruthless and had sincere passion for their goals. They need to be threatening to the player, as well as the league system as a whole, since they want to prove gym leaders and Elite Four members and champions are just soft. This team could reject the idea of battling for fun, and instead force the rod to battle just to win. Their views are that Pokemon are just jigsaw pieces that need to be combined in certain ways to be a good team. They see their methods of team building to be the correct way, and any deviations are pointless and make a trainer weak and pathetic. The legendary Pokemon they have could be the opposite box art legendary to the one that you'll find throughout the story. Similar to Scarlet and Violet, maybe you train alongside this Pokemon to learn about the art of battling and to hone in on its skills. During the climax, the 2 legendary Pokemon should clash to stop the evil team from manipulating Pokemon. They aren't pieces of a perfect puzzle to exploit, and understanding their unique interactions with unorthodox Pokemon partners shouldn't be a detriment. This could translate into the anime pretty well too. Yes, I'll be dipping into the anime side for Gen 10. The story could revolve around the points I mentioned earlier, but go into more depth. We'll get our protagonist team following the game's story, hopping from town to town, gym to gym, building up their Pokemon teams along the way. What if the focus was shared between the protagonist and the antagonist? The evil team could be entrepreneurs of the whole region, running how the league challenges run, almost gang-like, dominating each corner of the region and spreading the influences of the art of the perfect Pokemon battle. They use technology and data to determine how matches will play out. They study Pokemon, abilities, movesets, held items, and all the other hidden variables within a battle. They strive hard to have trainers believe their worldview of Pokemon battles, and aim towards perfecting what goes on within the battlefield. So much so it actually takes the fun and surprise out of the enjoyment. The big bad leader gets slowly revealed within the episodes, and they've been harnessing the box art legendary's powers to study attacks, defense, and speed within a battle. Each admin of the team can focus on a specific mode of Peter Powers and have influence over their own towns and cities. The protagonist team would have encounters with the opposite box art legendary and clash with the evil team's views and logic, appealing to fun battles and diverse team builds full of surprises rather than data, numbers and facts. They travel town to town collecting gym badges while also suppressing the evil team's influence and spread their own views with the local community. Eventually there could be arcs where each admin is defeated and they change their viewpoints completely, which clashes with the other admin and leaders. This could lead to several redemption arcs that could all have their own different resolves. The team would eventually learn the error of their way towards the end of the series, and the league structure would be altered to make the reasonable changes needed. Then we can see a finale where the protagonist takes on the strongest trainers of the region, having fun and enjoying themselves regardless of the battle results. Something I really enjoyed about Generation 7 and 9 was that each type was represented with a specialist. Well, nearly. I love how the trial captains and gym leaders covered almost half of the type chart, with the rest being covered by the Elite Four, side characters and boss Pokemon. For Generation 10, I'd hope if it did have 20 types, then each one could have a powerful representation through equally powerful trainers. Maybe the gym badge requirement could be increased from 8 to 10 to compensate. Then 4 could be covered by the Elite 4, 4 could be covered by the evil team leaders, and the last 2 could be covered by 2 important characters within the game. This would showcase every type fairly, and could make replayability so much more exciting, as different team builds would interact with each of these specialists differently. So something that has stayed loyal to Pokemon throughout the decades is online play. On the surface, you pick a team of 6 and connect with another player and just battle. Nothing wrong with that, and if it's not broken, then why try to fix it? For each generation, online play has been tweaked slightly, but nothing has really changed in terms of its foundation. But what if the standard battle wasn't the only way to enjoy Pokemon battles? Similar to Pokemon Showdown, when going online, I'd love the option to pick what format I want to play. Have different restrictions determine what teams I'll be using, as well as what my opponent will bring. Maybe there could even be things like monotype battles and other fan favourite themes. I think that would really shake up online play and give players more freedom to what teams they want to test out, instead of the limitations of what the current regulation is. Finally, for Generation 10, I'd love to see new spin-off games come out to harken back to simpler times. I absolutely loved playing Mystery Dungeon, Ranger and Rumble, and I feel each new generation brought its own angle when it comes to creativity and gameplay with these titles. These spin-off games have stood the test of time, so my hopes for a new spin-off title could be just as creative and offer a brand new story unrelated to the main titles. As a worst case scenario, or better yet, a miracle in disguise, maybe we could revisit old spin-off games and have them be remastered just like with Mystery Dungeon and Snap. There's just something about spin-off games that I get attached to. The quaint stories that can be told, the emotional conflicts that you get to be a part of, the hardware features you get to experiment with. Just one spin-off game I can sink my teeth into is all I'm asking for. So there we have it. 10 topics of discussion that I hope can come into fruition in some capacity. What do you guys think about my list? Would there be anything you include or change? Because I'd love to hear it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And until next time, train hard and team build to the best of your ability, and I'll see you guys next time.